I'm the third Heather of the morning, Heather Coleman, and I'm at Oxfam America. Oxfam is a global humanitarian development organization, and Oxfam America has headquarters in Boston here in the U.S. With a large office in D.C. I'm based in Boston, and I'm focused specifically on climate change policy with some crossover with the private sector. I've been at Oxfam for about 4 years now, and have focused on climate change policy previous to that in states and regions in the U.S. So echoing the same themes, which is a good thing. I hope it doesn't create boredom, but I actually think it sets up a really interesting dialogue for the afternoon. So as I mentioned earlier, Oxfam is a global development humanitarian organization. We've actually been investing in the issue of climate change for over 5 years now. We had a large-scale global climate change campaign that we ran. We've really seen the impacts of climate change on the ground in the communities we work with, and have understood climate change as a global humanitarian crisis in the making. And as part of that work, we've really had quite a focus on both policy, of course, and also the private sector. And in the context of adaptation, the private sector's role and need to engage in this, and have developed a series of reports on this issue. First, we came out with a report called The New Adaptation Marketplace, which sought to try to explain the different sectors in which we saw opportunity for business engagement on this topic. We then developed a report that started to quantify the jobs, the job base that we see in the U.S. context for jobs that are already contributing to adaptation-related sectors, with the goal to start to paint a picture of what we think job growth could look like in this sector. We weren't able to actually quantify growth moving out over a series of time, but we were able to look at, and we were able to quantify around 2 million jobs in the U.S. context related to adaptation. Last week, we launched this latest report, Adapting for a Green Economy. It's out on the table in partnership with the UN Global Compact, with the World Resources Institute, and with UNEP. And this report really came about because the Caring for Climate group of companies, which is a project of the UN Global Compact, a group of companies that are engaging in climate change solutions and climate change policy, had identified adaptation as an area where they wanted to further engage in and understand. And that's how the report overall came about. We launched it last week down the street at the UN. So what did we find? So we essentially did a survey of the Caring for Climate companies, and we ended up with about 72 companies who responded to this fairly comprehensive survey around climate adaptation issues. And these companies represented a broad range of sectors and industry groups through both developed and developing countries. And what we found is that most folks were clear that yes, climate change poses a clear risk to our business. And that was on the order of around 83% of companies responded in a resounding yes to that question. On the issue of whether or not there are business opportunities that exist in the context of adaptation, 86% of respondents said yes. We see this as an opportunity. And yet, when we actually ask these folks, okay, well, are you doing something specifically to plan for adaptation? Are you developing a comprehensive strategy to respond and to plan for the future? The results were, I think, what you'd expect, quite low. Very few companies are truly integrating this into their long-term strategic thinking. And as a side note, I would say that as someone who sifted through many of the surveys, even amongst, I mean, these companies are among some of the more, the survey respondents are among some of the more engaged on climate change issues in the world. Even amongst that small group, very few people, many people were very confused about the difference between adaptation and mitigation. There was a lot of confusion around, part of it was terminology, but I think part of it was really getting your head around these issues as distinct and starting to really plan for them being in the future. So that was an interesting takeaway that I had.